Sir, I'm asking you for the last time.
The night air was sharp, sliced by the flash of red and blue lights that bled across the asphalt. Marcus Hale's grip tightened on the steering wheel as the cruiser idled behind him, its spotlight flooding his rearview mirror. His pulse hammered in his throat. He had done nothing wrong. His license was valid, his taillights intact. Still, his hands began to sweat. Boots scraped gravel. A flashlight beam struck his face like an accusation. "Step out of the vehicle." The officer barked, voice flat with authority and disdain. Marcus obeyed, every movement slow, deliberate. The night smelled of gasoline and damp leaves. His briefcase sat on the passenger seat, trial notes stacked inside, evidence prepared for court tomorrow. None of it mattered now. To this man, he was only a body in the dark, a silhouette that fit a script older than justice itself. The officer's eyes narrowed, mouth curling into something almost satisfied. "Funny," he muttered, circling Marcus like prey. "Men like you always think you don't belong here." The words landed like a blade. Marcus steadied himself, jaw locked. His title, his credentials, none of it could shield him from the weight of that sentence. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed, swallowed by the night. When the officer's hand drifted toward his holster, Marcus's breath caught, time freezing around him. He had a choice: silence or survival through speech. His voice cracked the stillness. "I'm the prosecutor assigned to this district." The officer didn't blink. His thumb pressed against the holster's snap. The glow of the dashboard clock read 11:42 p.m. Marcus Hale drove with his window cracked, letting in the crisp autumn air. His suit jacket was draped over the passenger seat, his trial binder stacked neatly on top of his briefcase. It had been another 14-hour day preparing motions, combing through discovery. Exhaustion pulled at his eyes, but his mind hummed with the cross-examinations he'd rehearsed. Tomorrow's hearing would be decisive. The rearview mirror filled suddenly with strobing red and blue. Marcus's chest tightened. The cruiser closed in, siren off but lights blaring. He guided his car onto the gravel shoulder, tires crunching. His fingers hovered above his phone, then stopped. Calling anyone now would look like defiance. He set it face down on the console. The blinding white spotlight snapped on, pinning him in place. A car door slammed. Boots approached. "Driver, hands on the wheel." Marcus obeyed instantly, palms splayed against the leather. The officer leaned down, flashlight stabbing into the cabin. The man was broad, middle-aged, his jaw shadowed with stubble. The light lingered on Marcus's face, then swept to the suit jacket, the leather briefcase, the trial binder's objects rendered suspicious by the gaze behind the beam. "You know why I pulled you over?" "No, officer." The silence stretched. The only sound was the wind skimming through the trees. The officer chuckled, low, humorless. "Funny? Folks like you never do." Marcus swallowed hard. His voice was steady, but his knuckles blanched against the wheel. "Was I speeding?" "Step out of the car." Marcus hesitated a second too long. The officer's hand brushed his holster. "I said, step out." Marcus opened the door slowly, the gravel cold under his polished shoes. He rose, careful to keep his hands visible. His mind replayed every training he'd ever had in compliance, how to survive the ritual of a stop that should never have happened. The cruiser's lights painted the trees black, the highway empty but for the two of them. The officer circled him, flashlight grazing his chest. His face: "Where you headed this time of night?" "Home, from work." "What kind of work keeps a man driving around past midnight?" Marcus drew a breath. He could give the safe answer, vague, but he knew the trap. Any hesitation could be spun as deceit. "I'm an attorney." The officer's smirk widened. "That right? You look more like a—" He let the word dangle, unfinished, ugly in its implication. Marcus held the silence. "License, registration." "My wallet is inside the car, on the driver's seat." "Get it slow." Marcus moved deliberately, reaching into the cabin. His eyes caught the reflection of his own face in the mirror, jaw-tight eyes unblinking. He retrieved the wallet, handed it over. The officer flipped it open, studied the ID under the harsh beam. "Hale, Marcus. Address. Checks out. That fancy suit yours?" "Yes." "Car registered in your name?" "Yes." "Aha." The man tapped the plastic against his flashlight. "Still doesn't explain why you're creeping through my district at midnight." Marcus exhaled through his nose. "Officer, is there a reason you stopped me?" The man's eyes narrowed. "You raising your voice at me?" "No." Marcus kept his tone level, clipped. I'm asking for clarification. The officer stepped closer, the smell of coffee and tobacco heavy on his breath. See, men like you think rules don't apply. Flash the nice suit, toss around the law degree, think you own the road. Marcus steadied his breathing. The words pried at him, tugged at every memory of condescension in courtrooms and boardrooms, the disbelief when he introduced himself as counsel. You don't belong out here, the officer muttered. Marcus's jaw locked. I work in this district every day. The flashlight beam hit his eyes again. Sure you do. Something in the officer's voice was different now, testing, daring him to push back. The silence burned, broken only by the crackle of the cruiser's radio. Finally Marcus said it. I'm the prosecutor assigned to this district. The officer didn't move. His thumb rested against the holster snap, pressing once, twice, a quiet rhythm of threat. Prosecutor, he repeated flatly. Yes. A smirk twitched across his lips. Then you should know better than to mouth off to law enforcement. I haven't mouthed off. I've answered every question you've asked. Wrong tone, wrong attitude. That alone can get you locked up tonight. Marcus's pulse thundered. He pictured the courtroom tomorrow, the evidence, the cross-exam he'd spent weeks preparing. All of it could vanish into this moment, into this man's decision. The officer leaned closer, voice dropping. Badge or no badge, don't think you're above the rules. I never claimed to be. Then prove it. The officer gestured toward the hood of the car. Hands flat. Spread your feet. Marcus froze. His mind screamed protest, humiliation, degradation, but his body moved anyway. He pressed his palms to the cold metal. His reflection wavered in the glass, distorted by the flashing lights. The officer's hands patted down his sides, rough, invasive. Keys, wallet, phone all confiscated, stacked on the hood. You're clear, the officer muttered, though his tone was anything but. Marcus straightened, breath shallow. Am I free to go? The officer tilted his head, savoring the moment. That depends. Marcus clenched his fists at his sides. On what? The smirk widened again, slow, deliberate. On whether I decide you've learned your place. The highway stretched silent and empty, the trees whispering in the wind. Marcus's heart hammered against his ribs. Every word from here mattered. One wrong phrase, one twitch, too sharp, and the night would not end with him at home. The cruiser's radio crackled again. A dispatcher's voice cut through the tension, summoning the officer to another call. The man didn't move. His hand still hovered by his holster. Marcus inhaled once, deep, bracing himself. Officer, he said quietly, this stop is unlawful, and you know it. The words hung in the night like sparks. The officer's eyes narrowed. His fingers flexed against the holster strap. For a moment, the air itself seemed to freeze. Then the officer took one slow step forward, shadow swallowing Marcus in the wash of red-blue light. The courthouse smelled faintly of coffee and old carpet, a building that had seen too many compromises. Dressed as justice, Marcus walked the narrow corridor with his briefcase in hand, jaw tight, heart still echoing the rhythm of last night's stop. He had slept little, just enough to fake composure. But the images replayed, the flashlight in his face, the smirk, the officer's hand grazing his holster. He pushed into his supervisor's office. Marcus said, District Attorney Whitaker, glancing up from a stack of files. You look rough. Long night. Marcus set the briefcase down, standing straight. I was pulled over, without cause. The officer escalated. He had me spread over the hood like a suspect. Whitaker sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. Which officer? I didn't catch his badge. Mid-40s, heavy build. The stop was racial. It was intimidation. Whitaker's eyes flicked to the window, then back. You want to file a report? Yes. Marcus's voice was sharp. This wasn't just harassment. He knew I was a prosecutor, and he didn't care. That matters. Whitaker leaned back. Look, I get it, but internal affairs move slow. These things rarely stick. You start that process, you'll make enemies in the department. Cops talk, they close ranks. You'll pay for it in court. Marcus's fists clenched, so I let it go. Pretend it didn't happen. Marcus, Whitaker said softly, be smart. You have a career to think about. The justice system runs on cooperation. If you sour that relationship, you'll feel it every time you step in front of a jury. The words struck like betrayal wrapped in paternal concern. In the hallway, Assistant DA Connolly intercepted him. Heard about last night, Connolly said, lowering his voice. Word travels fast. Marcus blinked. How? Dispatch chatter, officers gossip. Some folks here already think you're confrontational. This won't help. I followed every command. Doesn't matter. Perception's what counts. You file a complaint, they'll paint you as volatile, angry black man with a grudge. That's how the narrative writes itself. Marcus felt his chest hollow. So I just stay silent. Connolly's expression softened, but the words were blunt. If you want to keep your footing here, yes. Later that afternoon, Marcus tried again, this time with Judge Ellison during a recess. He hoped for a measure of validation. Your Honor, Marcus said carefully, may I speak off the record? An officer detained me last night, unlawfully. Ellison removed his glasses, polished them, and spoke in a tone designed to sound impartial but cutting. Marcus, you're an officer of the court. These encounters, they're unfortunate, yes, but part of the job. Don't overplay it. You don't want whispers about you undermining law enforcement. Marcus stared at him. Undermining? I was humiliated. Ellison slipped his glasses back on, ending the exchange. Justice isn't personal, counselor. Don't make it so. The gavel struck minutes later to reopen proceedings, but Marcus barely heard the next witness. He saw only the wall, smooth, white, impenetrable, paperwork and procedure, all engineered to smother truth. In the elevator, two clerks whispered as he entered. Their conversation died instantly. Their silence was heavier than accusation. By the end of the day, Marcus sat alone in his office, blinds drawn. His phone buzzed his wife's text. How was your day? He didn't answer. The room seemed to shrink around him, the walls themselves a reminder. Every path toward justice had already been lined with paper designed to blunt, delay, erase. Marcus laid his head in his hands, whispering to the empty room. How many walls do I have to break just to be believed? The silence gave no answer. Only the hum of the fluorescent lights, steady, indifferent. The courthouse cafeteria was always noisy at noon, plastic trays clattering, heels clicking, voices rising and falling in waves. But as Marcus stepped inside, a hush rippled briefly across the room. Heads turned, then just as quickly bent back over sandwiches and files. He felt it, the sudden shift of attention, the quick burial of whispers. He carried his tray to a corner table, jaw set, eyes forward. His phone buzzed with unread messages, none worth answering. A chair scraped opposite him. It was Rosa Alvarez, a public defender with sharp eyes and sharper instincts. She leaned in. You made quite the entrance last night, she said softly. Marcus frowned. Meaning, everyone's talking. Word is, you had an altercation with one of Midtown's finest. It wasn't an altercation, it was harassment. Rosa stirred her coffee. Doesn't matter what it was. What matters is how they spin it. And right now, they're painting you as combative. Marcus's hand clenched around his fork. So truth doesn't matter. She tilted her head. Truth rarely matters in this building. Perception does. That's the currency. Across the cafeteria, to Assistant Das at the salad bar, cast quick glances his way, then muttered something between them. One smirked, the other shrugged. Rosa noticed. See, already circling. You're not just Marcus the prosecutor anymore. You're Marcus the problem. He swallowed, the anger rising in his throat. All because I told the truth. That's enough, Rosa said quietly. Sometimes truth gets you eaten alive in places like this. That afternoon, Marcus met with defense attorney Brian Kessler to negotiate a plea. Normally their sparring carried an undercurrent of professional respect. Today, Kessler's smirk was different-edged. Rough night, Hale, Kessler said as soon as the door closed. Marcus's gaze sharpened. Word travels faster than evidence, apparently. Kessler chuckled, flipping through his client's file. Come on, don't be sore. The precinct's buzzing. Some cop roughed you up and now you're crying foul. Didn't think you had thin skin. Marcus's voice cut cold. What he did was unlawful. Kessler raised his eyebrows. Sure, but you know how it looks, right? The prosecutor who plays the race card the second things don't go his way. That's the story floating around. Not mine. Theirs. The words landed like stones. Marcus leaned forward, his voice low, tight. Do you realize how reckless that is? How dangerous? Kessler shrugged, as though it were all sport. Dangerous, maybe, but perception, Hale. That's what juries, judges, hell-of-en voters eat for breakfast. You can fight it if you want. Just know, the fight doesn't end with you. Marcus shut the file with a sharp snap. This meeting is over. Kessler only smirked again, gathering his papers. Careful, counselor. Wolves smell blood. By late evening, Marcus sat in his office, the courthouse nearly empty. He stared at the dark glass of the window, his reflection looking back like a stranger. A knock broke the silence. Rosa stepped in, coat draped over her arm. You need to hear this, she said. Clerks, officers, even some of your colleagues, they're saying you resisted, that you were aggressive. Marcus's head jerked up. That's a lie. Rosa nodded. But it's spreading. Whisper networks, Marcus, quicker than wildfire. They'll build a narrative before you can file a complaint. His chest tightened. So, I'm guilty by rumor. You're guilty by survival instinct, Rosa said softly. People protect power. You know that. He stood, pacing. The anger pulsed hot in his veins. Then what am I supposed to do? Stay quiet while they rewrite what happened. Rosa's gaze was steady, unflinching. You pick your battles, and you brace for the fallout when you choose wrong. Marcus stopped at the window, staring out at the city lights flickering like false beacons. In the glass, he saw not just his reflection, but the shadow of the officer's smirk, the hand grazing the holster. It haunted him still. The next morning, in the corridor outside Judge Ellison's chambers, Marcus caught fragments of conversation between two clerks. Yeah, I heard he mouthed off. Real attitude. Always thought he carried himself a little too high and mighty. Their voices faded when they noticed him. Smiles tightened, eyes darted away. Marcus walked on, head high, though every step felt heavier. Inside, the courthouse whispered, and the whispers were rewriting him. The letter arrived in a plain manila envelope, slipped beneath Marcus's office door. No return address, no signature, just his name typed across the front. He opened it, pulse quickening. Inside, a formal notice. Internal affairs complaint, allegations of misconduct, verbal aggression toward law enforcement during a traffic stop. Marcus read the lines twice, 3 times. His throat went dry. The words inverted reality, turning his compliance into hostility, his silence into violence. A knock came almost immediately, as if choreographed. Deputy Connolly stepped in, expression taut. You got it too? Marcus asked, voice tight. Connolly nodded at the paper. They're moving fast. Officer claims you've threatened him. That's a lie. Doesn't matter. IA has to investigate. You'll be called in for questioning. Marcus slammed the file onto his desk. I never raised my voice. He escalated. His words caught in his throat, rage clawing upward. They're flipping the script. Connolly lowered his voice. Marcus, this is bigger than truth. The department protects its own. They'll bury you before they let one of theirs look dirty. The Internal Affairs office was sterile, its fluorescent lights buzzing like a constant interrogation. Marcus sat stiff-backed across from 2 investigators. Their recorder clicked on. Mr. Hale, one said, tone flat, we're here to gather your account. Officer Daniels reported you were aggressive, refused lawful commands, and attempted to leverage your position to avoid citation. Marcus's chest burned. That's fiction. I complied with every order. I identified myself only after repeated harassment. He mocked me, had me spread on the hood like a criminal. The second investigator tapped his pen. So you admit, you asserted your title. I stated the truth. I'm the prosecutor assigned to this district. That's not leverage, it's fact. Yet you can see how it might appear as intimidation. Marcus's jaw clenched. No, the only intimidation came from his weapon, his tone, his conduct. The first investigator scribbled something down, not meeting his eyes. The recorder word, impartial, merciless. That evening, Marcus sat at his kitchen table, papers scattered, his wife Dana across from him. Her eyes were red, her voice sharp with worry. They're coming after you, she said. You know what happens when people push back. They crush them. I can't stay silent. You have to think of us, of our daughter. What if they take your badge? What if they drag your name through every headline? Marcus's hands trembled as he gathered the papers. So I accept it. Let him walk. Let them rewrite me as the criminal. Dana's voice cracked. I'm asking you to survive. That's all I want. Survive this. The silence stretched heavy. Marcus looked at her fear, her exhaustion. He wanted to promise safety. He couldn't. The next day, whispers in the courthouse became sharper, more open. IAS got him now. Can't believe he'd pull rank like that. Thought he was smarter. Even Rosa Alvarez, normally blunt and fearless, looked stricken when she found him in the corridor. They're building a wall around him, she said under her breath. He files, you're accused. He fabricates, you're on trial. Classic retaliation. Marcus's shoulders sagged. And everyone watches. They're not just watching. Some are waiting. If you fall, they don't have to face their own fears. By Friday, he was summoned to Whitaker's office. The DA's tone was clipped, managerial. Marcus, while the investigation's ongoing, we're reassigning your cases. To preserve impartiality, Marcus's blood ran cold. You're sidelining me. Whitaker adjusted his glasses, avoiding his stare. It's temporary, but optics matter. The defense bar's already circling, saying you can't be trusted. Because I was harassed. Whitaker's voice dropped to a practiced calm. Because now, you're the story. Marcus stared at him, betrayal burning through his chest. Outside, the corridor was silent as he walked past. Every door he passed seemed to close just a little quicker. Every voice softened to a whisper as he approached. The retaliation wasn't just paperwork, it was isolation. It was erasure. That night, Marcus sat alone in his office, the building nearly empty. He stared at the IA complaint again, its black ink twisting reality. His hands trembled, then steadied. He whispered to himself, voice low but certain, "They want me silenced, but I'm not done." The hum of the fluorescent lights was his only witness. The house was dim when Marcus came home, the kind of quiet that carried unease rather than rest. Dana was waiting at the kitchen table, a mug of untouched tea cooling in her hands. The lamp above her cast a warm glow that felt out of place against the chill in the air. "You didn't call," she said. "I stayed late," Marcus replied, loosening his tie. "Paperwork." She studied him, eyes weary. "Paperwork or running from this?" Marcus paused, then sat across from her. His shoulders slumped. "They reassigned my cases today." Dana set the mug down, porcelain clinking. "So it begins." The silence thickened until Marcus's mother's voice broke it faint, tremulous from the living room where she sat with their daughter. She had come over earlier, insisting on helping. Sensing the tension before Marcus spoke a word, "Marcus," she called, "come here." He walked into the living room. His mother, Evelyn, sat on the sofa with his 8-year-old Grace, asleep in her lap. Evelyn's gaze was sharp, unsoftened by age. "I heard you're fighting them," she said. Marcus nodded. "I can't just let it slide." Her eyes glistened, though her tone was steel. "Every generation, the same story. They pull you over, humiliate you, rewrite it as your fault. Your father lived it. I lived it. Now you. I'm not just another man on the street, Mom. I'm the prosecutor here." "That has to mean something." "It means you're a target with a title," she answered. "They'll come harder for you to make an example." Marcus swallowed, the weight of her words pressing on him. Later, after putting Grace to bed, Dana confronted him in their room. Her voice was low but shaking. "You talk about justice like it's a shield, Marcus, but it's not. It's paper, and it burns too easily. You saw that today." He sat at the edge of the bed, head in his hands. "If I stop, what message do I send, Grace? That silence keeps you safe. That survival means swallowing humiliation." Dana's tears spilled over. Survival means being here for her. She doesn't need a martyr. She needs her father. Marcus looked at her, throat tight. "And what happens if I show her that fear always wins?" They sat in silence, the argument collapsing into exhaustion. No resolution, only the widening gulf between fear and defiance. On Saturday, Marcus visited his father's grave. The cemetery was quiet, the wind rustling brittle leaves. He stood before the headstone, hands in his pockets. "You warned me," Marcus murmured, "told me there'd be nights like this. But I thought wearing the badge of the law would protect me. Turns out, it just paints a bigger target." The wind carried no answer, only the cold, only the silence. That evening, Evelyn watched Marcus quietly from the kitchen doorway as he tucked Grace into bed. He kissed her forehead, lingered a moment longer than usual. When he closed the door, Evelyn spoke. "You'll pay a price, no matter what you do. The only question is, which price can you live with?" Marcus looked at her, eyes hollow. "And which price won't kill the people I love?" She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The truth had already settled between them, heavy as stone. The story broke on Monday morning, not in the city's main paper, where Marcus had friends who might have softened the blow, but on a local blog notorious for sensational headlines. The headline read, "Prosecutor claims racial profiling after routine stopped playing the race card." By noon, the article had been shared thousands of times. Anonymous comments filled the site, seething with vitriol. Screenshots spread across social media, twisting the story into sound bites. "Arrogant Da thinks he's above the law." Marcus sat in his office, blinds drawn. His phone buzzed, relentlessly missed calls from reporters, terse emails from the DA's office, messages from colleagues advising him to lay low. At lunch, he walked into the courthouse cafeteria. Conversations hushed. Some nodded in sympathy, others avoided his eyes, and a few sneered openly. A defense attorney he'd known for years leaned over as Marcus passed. "Careful, man. The public's not on your side this time." Marcus stopped, jaw tight. Since when was justice a popularity contest? The attorney shrugged. Since the mob moved online, truth don't trend. Outrage does. That evening, Dana scrolled through her phone at the dinner table, her face pale. "Marcus, it's everywhere. They're digging into old cases, questioning your record. Even Grace's school called today. They wanted to know if she's safe from harassment." Marcus's chest tightened. "She's 8. What could they possibly?" "Kids repeat what their parents hear," Dana interrupted. "Grace doesn't need to be the daughter of the angry prosecutor." The fork clattered against Marcus's plate. "So I'm supposed to let them rewrite the truth? Pretend I imagined what happened that night?" Dana looked at him with eyes that were more tired than angry now. "You're not fighting them, Marcus. You're feeding them." The following day, Marcus attended a press briefing outside the courthouse. Cameras flashed, microphones thrust toward his face. "Mr. Wright," one reporter barked, "isn't it true you're exploiting your position for personal gain? Did you fabricate your allegations to distract from declining conviction rates?" Another demanded. Marcus steadied himself, voice controlled but clipped. "I filed a report because I was unlawfully targeted. My title doesn't exempt me from harassment. If anything, it proves how easily this can happen to anyone without power or voice." The crowd erupted with overlapping questions, half jeering, half pressing. Security had to guide him back inside by nightfall. The clip was everywhere, edited, spliced, misquote. Some praised his courage, others mocked his composure, claiming he was overacting. 3 days later, a protest formed on the courthouse steps, not in Marcus's support against him. Signs read, "Keep politics out of justice and fire the race-baiting DA." From his office window, Marcus watched the crowd chant. His deputy entered quietly, shutting the blinds. "They're calling for a review of your conduct," she said. "Internal Affairs is getting pressure from the mayor's office." Marcus stared at the closed blinds, the muffled sound of shouting leaking in. "So the system caves to noise now." His deputy hesitated, then added, "Noise becomes narrative, and narrative decides careers." That night, Evelyn confronted him again. Her voice was rougher, tinged with sorrow. "They've set their sights, Marcus. You think you're fighting for dignity, but they're framing you as a threat to their order." He sat at the table, eyes bloodshot. "What am I supposed to do, Mum? Sit quiet and let them crush me? You think it's about you. It's not. It's about every man who dared to raise his head and remind them their power has limits. That's why they'll grind you down." Marcus clenched his fists. "Then let them see me stand." Evelyn's voice dropped. "Stand if you must. But remember, when they swing, they don't aim just for you. They aim for everyone behind you." By the week's end, Grace came home from school in tears. "Daddy," she whispered, "a boy said you're going to jail. Is that true?" Marcus froze, his chest aching as he pulled her into his arms. "No, baby, Daddy's not going to jail." But even as he said it, the words carried less certainty than he wanted. The pressure was no longer just professional. It was public, relentless, and personal. The machine had moved, and Marcus felt its gears grinding toward him, ready to consume anything in reach. Rain pounded the city that night, streaking courthouse windows like veins of gray. Marcus sat alone in his office, the clock inching toward midnight. His tie hung loose, his desk cluttered with reports, unopened mail, and copies of the complaint he'd filed weeks ago. Every word he'd written now felt like a trigger. The door burst open. Dana stepped inside, soaked from the storm. Her umbrella dripped on the carpet. "Why didn't you come home?" she demanded, her voice sharp with exhaustion. Marcus leaned back, shadows hollowing his face. "I can't. Not with this fire closing in on us." "You think hiding here changes anything?" she shot back. "Grace is scared. She's asking questions I can't answer. I'm drowning, Marcus, and you're hiding behind your desk while the world paints us as liars." Marcus slammed his palm against the desk, papers fluttering. "What do you want me to do? Pretend none of it happened? Pretend I wasn't pulled out of my car and humiliated like a criminal?" Dana's chest heaved. "I want you to choose your family over your pride." The silence stretched. Rain hammered the glass. The next morning, Marcus walked into the DA's office and found his boss waiting. The district attorney, a broad-shouldered man with a politician's smile, gestured for him to sit. "Marcus," he began, tone rehearsed, "you've been valuable to this office, but this circus around you, it's a distraction we can't afford. The mayor's leaning on us, donors are restless, the public's confidence is at stake." Marcus sat rigid. "So you want me to resign?" Step aside temporarily, the DA corrected. For the good of the institution, let things cool down. Marcus's jaw tightened. You mean for the good of your career? The DA's smile faltered. Don't make this harder than it has to be. Marcus stood, voice flat. You bend when they push. I don't. He left without shaking hands. That afternoon, Internal Affairs summoned him again. This time, the interrogation was sharper. Two investigators sat across from him, their questions clipped. Mr. Wright, did you use your position to intimidate officers? Did you fabricate details in your complaint? Were you drinking that night? Marcus's answers came cold and controlled, but each denial seemed to fuel their skepticism. Finally, one leaned forward. Mr. Wright, off the record, don't you think you're dragging this out? Wouldn't it be easier to drop it? Marcus stared into his eyes. Easier for who? They won't stop, Marcus murmured, collapsing into a chair. His voice shook. They're coming until I'm ruined. Evelyn's eyes softened. She reached for his hand. Then you decide, son, break or bend into something stronger. Marcus met her gaze, his heart thundering. For the first time, he understood this was no longer about survival. This was about transformation. The storm outside raged on. Inside, so did he. The newsroom buzzed with the low hum of printers and the sharp click of keyboards. Marcus sat across from Lena Torres, an investigative journalist known for tearing down untouchable men in expensive suits. She leaned back in her chair, eyes narrowed, recorder on the table between them. You sure you want to do this? She asked. Because once it's out, there's no pulling back. Marcus's voice was hoarse but steady. They've painted me as a liar. If I don't show them the truth, they'll bury me alive. Lena tapped her pen against a notebook. I'll need evidence, documents, audio, anything that puts the system on trial, not just you. Marcus slid a flash drive across the table. Body cam logs, redacted reports, and the complaint file they tried to lose. It's all there. Her eyes lit up. You held on to this. They thought I'd play defense. I've been building a fence. 2 days later, the first article dropped. Internal report suggests officer lied during traffic stop of prosecutor. The piece was surgical, weaving leaked documents with Marcus's account, screenshots of altered times, gaps in radio transmissions, a line from an officer's deposition that contradicted itself in the span of 1 page. Social media erupted. For the first time, the tide shifted. #Justice for Marcus. Commentators demanded answers. Civil rights groups called for an independent investigation. But with attention came retaliation. That evening, Marcus arrived home to flashing lights outside his house. A patrol car sat parked across the street. Officers leaned casually on the hood, watching. Dana pulled the curtains tight. They're trying to scare us, she whispered. Marcus kissed Grace on the forehead, trying to mask the tremor in his hands. They won't break me, he said, though his voice wavered. Evelyn sat in her armchair, gaze fixed on the glowing television screen, replaying Lena's report. You've poked the hive, son. Now, be ready for the swarm. At the courthouse the next morning, Marcus walked through the metal detector, eyes following him from every corner. Defense attorneys smirked, prosecutors whispered, and clerks avoided his gaze. But in the lobby, a small group of protesters held signs, "End racial profiling," and "We stand with Marcus." Their chants echoed against the marble walls. For the first time in weeks, Marcus felt air in his lungs. He wasn't alone. The DA summoned him by noon. The office was tense, the blinds drawn, as though shielding the building from the outside world. Marcus, the DA began, voice clipped. What the hell do you think you're doing, feeding documents to the press? Marcus didn't blink, exposing what you buried. The DA's fist hit the desk. You're burning bridges you can't rebuild. Maybe they shouldn't have been built on lies. Marcus shot back. The silence afterward was suffocating. Finally, the DA exhaled sharply. They'll sacrifice you for this. You know that, right? The officers, the unions, the mayor, none of them will forgive a public spectacle. Marcus's voice was low, steady. Then let them choke on it. That night, another story broke. Lena's second installment. This one included leaked footage, a sliver of security, camera video from a convenience store across the street, the night of Marcus's stop. The grainy clip showed his car pulled over, Marcus stepping out calmly, hands raised, the officers shoving him against the hood, frisking him without provocation, and then the officer's voice, clear enough to pierce the static. People like you never learn where you belong. The clip went viral within hours. Outrage poured in from across the city. Then, across the country, national anchors replayed it with grave commentary. Politicians scrambled to issue statements. The union held a press conference, the officer's lawyer calling the footage misleading, taken out of context, but the damage was done. Marcus sat in his living room with Dana, Grace, asleep upstairs. The glow of the television lit his face, weary but resolute. Dana whispered, "They can't ignore this anymore." Evelyn, sitting in the corner, closed her Bible and spoke with quiet steel. "Truth has a way of cutting through noise, Marcus, but truth also makes enemies." Marcus nodded slowly. His phone buzzed with messages from allies, from strangers, from reporters desperate for quote. But his mind was somewhere else, somewhere darker. Because for every voice rising in his defense, he knew the system was already calculating how to strike back. 3 nights later, a rock crashed through his living room window. Glass sprayed across the carpet. Grace screaming from upstairs. Marcus ran outside barefoot, heart racing, but the street was empty except for the patrol car idling 2 houses down. The officers inside didn't move, didn't even look at him. They just sat there, silhouettes in the glow of the dashboard, as if daring him to act. Marcus stood in the cold night, fists clenched, chest heaving, knowing this was no longer just about exposing lies. This was war. The courtroom overflowed. Cameras lined the back wall, reporters packed shoulder to shoulder, pens scribbling, lenses clicking. The city had not seen a trial like this in decades. Not an officer in uniform on the stand, forced to answer for his actions. Marcus sat at the prosecution's table, not as counsel but as complainant, his role inverted. Across the room, Officer Clay adjusted his tie, his attorney whispering furiously in his ear. The jury's eyes tracked every twitch, every bead of sweat. The judge entered, gavel cracking like a gunshot. "Court is now in session." The prosecution's opening statement was calm, deliberate, anchored by the leaked footage. "Ladies and gentlemen, you will see evidence that Officer Clay falsified his report, altered his body cam log, and unlawfully detained Mr. Wright. This is not about a single bad night. This is about trust. Trust in those sworn to protect." Gasps fluttered when the clip replayed. Marcus pinned against the hood, the officer's words searing the silence. "People like you never learn where you belong." Clay's defense scrambled. His lawyer painted Marcus as combative, arrogant, intoxicated with power. "Ask yourselves," the lawyer said, pacing the jury box, "why a man who prosecutes for a living would suddenly cry victim. Why now, after his record has come under scrutiny?" Marcus's stomach twisted. They weren't just prosecuting Clay, they were prosecuting him. During cross-examination, Marcus took the stand. The defense lawyer pounced. "Mr. Wright, isn't it true you identified yourself as a prosecutor during the stop to intimidate officers?" "I identified myself because I feared escalation," Marcus replied evenly. The lawyer smirked. "So you admit you used your title as leverage?" Marcus's voice tightened. "I used it to survive." The courtroom murmured. The judge banged his gavel. Outside, protests roared. Civil rights groups marched with signs. "No one above the law." Not even police. Counter-protesters shouted back, "Stand with blue." The courthouse steps became a battlefield of chants, drums, and bullhorns. Inside, the jury listened, stone-faced. The turning point came when Lena Torres was called. She testified about the leaked reports, the doctored logs, the memos buried by Internal Affairs. The defense objected, but the judge overruled. Her final words cut through the courtroom like glass. "What you're seeing is not one officer gone rogue. It's a system protecting itself until someone forces the cracks open." On the 3rd day, Internal Affairs investigators were called. Under oath, one admitted that complaints against Officer Clay had been filed before and dismissed. "By whom?" the prosecutor pressed. "By superiors." The investigator answered reluctantly. A ripple of shock coursed through the room. The jury shifted. The tide turned. When closing arguments ended, the jury deliberated for 8 tense hours. Marcus paced the hall outside, Dana gripping his hand, Evelyn seated silently with her Bible clutched tight. Grace, too young to be there, stayed with relatives. Finally, the jury returned. The foreman stood. On the charge of falsifying official records, guilty. On the charge of unlawful detention, guilty. On the charge of perjury, guilty. The courtroom exploded. Shouts, sobs, reporters rushing for the door. The judge's gavel thundered, barely restoring order. Marcus sat frozen, chest tight, eyes burning. For weeks he'd imagined this moment. Vindication, justice. But what he felt wasn't triumph, it was exhaustion. The DA called him into his office the next day. "You won," the DA said flatly, "but you've made enemies, deep ones. City Hall, the union, half the department. They won't forget this." Marcus met his eyes. "Neither will I." The DA leaned back, sighing. "Your career's radioactive now. You'll never climb higher in this city." Marcus stood, voice steady. "Then I'll climb somewhere else." That night, back at home, the house felt different. Not safer, not healed, but lighter. As though a weight had shifted. Grace curled up on his lap, whispering, "Daddy, does this mean they can't hurt you anymore?" Marcus kissed her forehead, his voice gentle. "It means they can't pretend anymore." Dana watched him from across the room, her eyes softening for the first time in weeks. Evelyn, in her corner, murmured a prayer of thanks. The next morning, Marcus walked alone through the city, past shuttered shops, through streets buzzing with the remnants of protest signs and news vans. Everywhere, his name echoed, not as victim, not as villain, but as proof. Proof that the cracks could show, proof that the system could bleed. But he also knew the cost. His career would never recover here. His family bore scars that wouldn't fade. His daughter would grow up remembering broken windows and whispered insults. Poetic justice had been served, yes, but it had demanded its pound of flesh. Boffa stopped at the courthouse steps, looking up at the pillars bathed in morning light. For the first time since the night of the stop, he exhaled fully. The war wasn't over, but this battle was his. 6 months later, the courthouse lobby still bore scars of the protests, cuffed marble, scratched pillars, a faint echo of chants that once rattled its glass walls. Marcus hadn't set foot inside since the trial. Today, he returned not in a suit, but in a simple shirt and jacket. No tie, no briefcase, just a man walking into a place where he had once wielded authority, now carrying only memory. The city had moved on in its way. The officer sat in prison, appealing his sentence. The police union still raged, insisting the trial had been a political witch hunt. The DA's office carried on, quieter now, avoiding Marcus's name like it was radioactive. But Marcus's world was permanently altered. He met Lena Torres in the lobby cafe. She waved him over, recorder nowhere in sight. "You're out of the headlines," she said with a small smile. "Feels strange, doesn't it?" Marcus sipped his coffee, eyes tired but steady. "Strange, yes, but quiet as survival." She leaned in. "You know they still watch you. They still whisper your name in back rooms. But you shifted the ground. People are filing complaints now who never dared before. Some of them are being heard." Marcus let that sink in. A sliver of justice, a ripple, not a wave. At home, the changes were subtler. Grace no longer woke from nightmares, but she still asked, sometimes, "Daddy, are the bad men gone?" Marcus never lied, he told her. "Some are, some aren't, but we'll keep walking forward." Dana had come back from the edge, her anger cooled into wary resolve. Their marriage, once hanging by a thread, now rested on fragile but honest ground. Evelyn's health had declined, her steps slower, her voice softer, but when she prayed at night, her words carried a fierce pride Marcus had never heard before. The cost was everywhere, visible and invisible. His career in the city was over. No law firm would touch him, no office would promote him, but offers had come from out of state, from advocacy groups, from universities. Doors he never expected now cracked open, and yet he hesitated, because the victory hadn't been clean. It had been bloodied, stained by fear, betrayal, and the look in his daughter's eyes when glass shattered across their living room. One evening, Marcus stood on his porch, the sun sinking behind the row of houses. Evelyn joined him, wrapped in a shawl, her voice gravelly. "You did what most men wouldn't," she said. "You tore the mask off their face. Don't ever think it was for nothing." Marcus looked at her, his throat tight. "But at what cost, Mum? My job, my family's safety, Grace's innocence." Evelyn's gaze didn't waver. "Freedom always costs. Dignity always costs. The question isn't whether it's worth the price. The question is whether you could have lived with yourself if you hadn't paid it." He said nothing. He didn't need to. Weeks later, Marcus packed his office into 2 cardboard boxes, family photos, case files, a diploma. The walls were bare. He carried the boxes to his car and paused, staring at the courthouse one last time. It wasn't a temple. It wasn't even a fortress. It was a machine capable of grinding people down, but also, sometimes, capable of turning against itself when forced. Months down the line, Marcus would take a teaching job at a law school. He'd stand before young men and women, some black, some white, all hungry for truth, and he'd teach them what no textbook could hold. How justice bends, how truth bleeds, how standing costs, but silence kills. And every so often, late at night, he'd sit at his desk, replaying the stop in his mind, the headlights, the officer's smirk, the words that carved a scar. People like you never learn where you belong. Marcus would close his eyes, take a breath, and remind himself he had answered. He had stood, and though the system had clawed at him, scarred him, nearly broken him, he still belonged.